how are you? It's Tim, and I got my podcast tonight. Nikki Pett. This is Relationships 101, the ROI. She wrote a book, and then she came in to do a podcast with me. I just got home. As you can see, podcasting doesn't do very well. But Nikki's inside, and we're going to do a great show today. This is T-Ball. I'm Tim Byrne. T-Ball. Tim Byrne Almost Live, and I'm going to spend the next half an hour inside my house with Nikki. And weirdly enough, she's interviewing me this time. I'm not interviewing her. After I'm done, I'm going to shovel the driveway. I'll see you in a half hour. This is Tim Byrne Almost Live. I'm Tim Byrne. What's your full name?
Nikki Pett.
Nikki Pett. Pett. What's Pett? What background?
So I married an Englishman, but I'm Scottish.
So you're cheap.
No, I'm not actually. I'm really generous, but I have very cheap family members.
Yeah, right? Because Scottish it's notorious for Scottish people. It's like us Irish people are drunks. Nikki Pett. Relationships ROI, how associations, charities, and entrepreneurial hit financial targets. I haven't read it. Sure.
I know. I just brought them in today. So I did this one.
Is it new release or is it old released?
No. So I did that. I wrote that book about 6 years ago. And there's lots of strategies in there for actually growing your business. And it's through relationships. And a lot of it is appreciation and gratitude. And just capturing the untapped market of current clients and referral sources. Because I feel like entrepreneurs are always looking for what's new and exciting. And they forget their existing relationships.
You listen to the show.
I do.
You found us, I think, more than we found you. Is that true? Or you found each other at an association event?
We found each other.
That's nice, right? You and Alex found each other.
We did.
Daughter of goat.
And I was speaking at a TCA event. That's how we met.
All right.
Yes.
Right on.
So I was doing a show on our show, Mamma Mia.
Sure. No show. Presentation, a seminar, workshop.
I was putting on a show.
Right.
For TCA on increasing your trade show results.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on.
Because a lot of people, given the nature of my business, having a promotional products business, I see a lot of people just give away stuff and then just hopefully they're just like hoping for the best. They just randomly give away crap, but there's no strategy behind the questions to ask, the follow-up and all that.
And you're planning to interview me.
I am. We should stop.
Over this next hour rather than me interview you. Right. That's what's going to happen here, right?
We're flipping the scripts.
Which is really weird for me to be the guy not asking questions because I have a million questions I want to ask you about your workshop and about trade shows because we just talked about trade shows yesterday and people not actually running their booths well.
Yes.
Right. And what mindset you go into trade shows and what your goals are.
Absolutely.
And set clear expectations going in so you have results coming out that are measurable.
Yeah, well, most people spend a ton and then I'll ask them, what's the goal? What's the objective? Well, we're looking for exposure, which is great. But if I'm a business owner, I want you to know how many leads you're going to come out with. What do you convert at? What is the overall? Do you know what I mean? So I think that people are not tapping into the potential that they could be there.
And then you have to segregate the difference between business to business trade shows and business to consumer trade shows because then those, for our listeners, those are two separate paradigms. They're not attached. And I think when for myself and PM Expo that's next week, it's a business to business trade show. So the expectations generically for business to business are much different than when you're doing a trade show with business to consumer.
Agreed.
I don't think there's a direct revenue sales approach. I do think it's a brand and a marketing approach. Yeah. But then you still have to figure out how you're going to measure results.
Absolutely. And the follow-up. And cultivating the relationship. And
the problem is, and you just said about entrepreneurials in comparison to your staff working the booth.
Yes.
Most of your staff are salespeople on business to business trade shows. And those salespeople are directly related to operational revenue growth. Where an entrepreneur has two goals. One is that operational revenue growth. The other one is a direct relationship to how to create their brand strength.
Yes.
Because as an entrepreneur, we often, and we talked about this yesterday, as entrepreneurs, especially in our first 10 years, we often forget that your brand has a untaxable value to it.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. In comparison to your 3 times earnings on your profit and what your company is worth based off operational revenue. And when you do a business evaluation, they actually if somebody wanted to come buy your company, they would split it in two parts and go, here's what your profit is, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times earning, whatever you are. And then there's a calculation of what your goodwill is worth or what your brand is worth. And when entrepreneurs go to trade shows, they have to figure out what kind of brand exposure they're getting and what they're bringing to the marketplace, and know that 3 days in that trade show is not just about the operational revenue, day-to-day revenue, but it's also about brand recognition, so that your brand has a value when you go to the bank, when you go to the marketplace, when you go to sell, when you go to move, when you go to grow, because you got to extrapolate cash flow with a bank, and just doing it with earnings is in North America's environment, and the U.S. is much better at taxation than we are as far as businesses are concerned. But Canadian companies get raped and pillaged by RevCan. So to go into a trade show as an entrepreneur and not realize that your brand has value, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So if you're just attacking your salespeople about what client did you find, what revenue are we going to get, where's the next operational revenue coming from, and yes, that's something that entrepreneurs and owners do. But what you have to do is, in the back of your head, go, did I forward my brand? Did I increase my brand recognition, and did I give my brand a value beyond me?
Awesome.
Because most companies, myself included, you spend the first 10 years of your life selling you, not your brand. And then somewhere along the line, you have some awakening and some estate planning, and you realize that you need your company.
An exit strategy.
Yeah, you need your company to survive beyond you.
Yep.
It's not you. It has nothing to do with you as a person, and yet you spend those first 7-8 years just going, I'm Tim Byrne. This is Stated Door and Glass. Tim Byrne, Stated Door and Glass. And then you realize, ironically, as an adult business, a business that's now over 30 years of age, I'm bringing it back to me, but as a different marketplace. So you're right. This podcast is called Tim Byrne Almost Live, and I've decided to segregate it from Stated Door and Glass and segregate it from Byrne On Demand and make it an independent brand on its own.
Okay.
And I'm not worried about its revenue. I'm worried about its brand recognition.
I have a special treat coming your way for that.
All right. So I'm going to shut up now. I really wish that I had a chance to read your book prior.
Oh, good. We're flipping the scripts. I'm interviewing you.
I know you are, yeah.
So you're going in the next book. That's the whole thing.
And what's the next book going to be called?
So it is the multi-million-dollar mindset. And the whole premise behind it is, why do some companies teeter at that $500,000? Because I had this epiphany a couple of years ago where I'm like, this could be $100 million company. So how do I get from here to here? And what have other people done? And so I'm going to read the book that you recommended. But also...
Too big to be small, too small to be big.
Perfect.
I can't remember the name of the author. It was put up about 20 years ago.
I will look it up.
Yeah.
I will find it. So I wanted to get inside the entrepreneur's mind of what were some of the hurdles and how did you overcome them and how did you grow and how did you scale up in HR? So there's a bunch of different questions that I want to go through if you're set.
And honestly, for the 3 people that are watching, including my grandmother, or my mother, sorry, not my grandmother, my kid's Nan, I haven't actually had any insight to what our interview would be. We literally just walked in the studio and said, let's go.
Let's go.
Right. All right. So
that's why I appreciate you, because you're vulnerable.
Oh,
this
right.
is huge, right?
Yeah.
I love it. That's why people connect with you.
You take a big shit kicking a lot when you're willing to be vulnerable.
Hey, people love you.
It's okay.
All right.
I can take it.
So when you first started Stadia in your brother's house, correct?
Yeah.
Did you ever dream it would be the size it is now? And what were some of the steps you took? What were some of the major steps you took to grow?
That's a huge question. Right?
I know. We got time.
That could just fill a whole hour. When we started in Kevin the Goat's spare bedroom in 1988, 89-ish, I guess we went into the mindset that we were already a big company. We didn't go into it thinking we were a small company. So the psychological aura that you go into your business is one that will dictate your outcome. So I think for entrepreneurs that, and by the way, most entrepreneurs aren't consciously aware of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They do it innately.
Going through
they're starving.
Day-to-day,
they're starving.
Yeah.
They got fired. They got let go.
Mm-hmm.
just said, fuck it, we're just heading this direction, and they do it blindly. They really do. And funny enough, the more academic an entrepreneur is, the less likelihood they're going to succeed.
Because they overanalyze.
Yeah, they actually spend more time analyzing the hypothesis of outcome than they do just heading towards the finish line. And the ones that have less academic, and actually if you Google the top 1,000 successful people in the world, you're going to find out that all 1,000 of them do not have a secondary education.
Wow.
They never made it through college or university,
I didn't finish college, yeah.
Yeah, very few entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
And the ones that, and not to say, listen, I'm an advocate for education. I get that. You got to learn how to read and write. Saying that, I quit high school when I was 16, so... But I think the sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, the less you know, the better.
I agree with that. Because if you were to look back at some of the things that you went through, had you known you'd have to cross those hurdles, tackle the mountains that...
If somebody said to you, you're going to go into business for yourself and your staff are going to make more money than you for the first 4 years, and you're going to make less in your T4 slip than you've ever made in your life. And there's a good chance that you're going to lose your house.
I'm in.
No, think about it. Okay, so I'm going to make less. Oh, and by the way, you're going to work more hours than you ever worked in your life. You're no longer going to be able to quit at 5. Oh, and if you do quit at 5, it only means you're going to have to get back and work at 10 at night, not 10 the next day. And I think if somebody rationally said to you, you're going to make less than your employees, your HST and the Receiver General in Canada needs to be paid before you do. You may not be able to make your mortgage payment. Your bank might call you. Your credit cards are going to ask where your minimum payment is, and you can only afford to put your minimum payment down, not because that's what you choose to do because you're managing your economics, but because you're forced to do because you don't have any cash flow. When you're calling up people, even the idea of begging for somebody to pay your bill. Yeah. It's almost humiliating to and it's something that you have to overcome. It's funny. We hire people. I have people today in a accounts receivable department that call up and basically beg for our payment. I can remember back when we started, because what you do when you go into that entrepreneurship, you go in with an ego, and you become humble really quick. But you go in with an ego, so you go, I shouldn't have to call you and ask for payment. I never had to call my employer and ask for my paycheck. Right? And you're like, no, see, it's different. So everybody in this building gets their paycheck and nobody had to ask for it.
So I have to share with you, as I've been interviewing other entrepreneurs, it's a theme right across the board, right? The cash flow, whether you're growing. I know when we were going through a huge growth spurt one year, it was the first year I did $1 million in sales. Everyone's like, oh, you must be so happy.
I'm holding in front of the camera. Get rid of this, please.
You must be so happy. And I was literally ready to walk in front of a bus because I didn't have any money. I didn't have any cash flow. And I called my husband because I remember going to open up the mail and there was still no money because I'm like, okay, today will be the day. Today there'll be checks in the mail. And so I'm opening them all up and I get to the end and they're all bills. I'm just bawling my eyes out and I call my husband. He's like, babe, this is when 99% of people give up. Is this resonating with you?
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
I think that moment, that anxiety, it's really hard for new entrepreneurs to grasp that idea or that fear, that anxiety. And I think if you know too much, you just won't do it. Agreed.
You almost have to have the screw it, let's do it attitude. Just like get into it. Yeah. Figure it out as you go.
Well, so that's the other thing. I'm going to delineate and we're going to go off in a different path. Yep. A lot of my staff over the years, as we make changes in how we do business, have come to me and said, I don't know how to do that. I now answer a different answer than I answered a long time ago. A long time ago, I would, when we change something around and we're doing a different process, and they'll come to me and go, I don't know how to do that, Tim. I used to sit down and explain it to them. This is how you do it. And you A to B, B to C, D. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, today, I look at them and go, either did I when I first started.
You'll figure it out.
I had not a clue how to write an invoice. I had not a clue how to pay the receiver general. I had not a clue how to send a quote. I had not a clue how to fill out a credit application. I knew nothing. And it's funny, too, as time progresses. There's a friend of mine in the IT business who says to me that people that write code, their mandate is to write code faster and better than the decreasing critical intelligence of humans.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an awful statement, right?
Yeah.
Because he said that people have become so relatable to instant gratification and install wizards that they've actually lost the ability to critically think, to problem solve on the fly. Yeah, no, and so entrepreneurs, the more you know, the more it kills you, right?
Exactly. Crazy. So I have to share with you, when I was interviewing another entrepreneur, she mentioned, she sat in her office and had that holy crap moment where everyone left on a Friday and they had all just been paid, and she hadn't been paid in like 2 months. And she's watching, she has this moment of hate where she's like, screw all of you. But I think that there's sometimes misconception too with entrepreneurs when they see that you've become more successful, or you drive a great car, or you take a great trip. Like, what are some of the misconceptions you think that people see?
Okay, let's take the staff aside and we'll focus just on that entrepreneur and stay with them. So I'm going to give you a timeline, and then we can delve into each one. The first 3 to 4 years, you starve, and you're begging for people to pay bills. Your staff are getting paid more. You build up resentment and anxiety, fear of tomorrow. Sometime between the 4th year to the 7th year, your company will start to make money as an entrepreneur if you're willing to grind it out that far. Oh, and just statistically to know that, and this is an old statistic, and it's probably changed. I'm guessing it hasn't, but there's a good chance that somebody Googles this and then starts texting back at me going, you're wrong. 85% of all Canadian small businesses stop operating, / go bankrupt, / close within 10 years. Because the first 4 years, you're full of anxiety, resentment, not making any money, having a really tough time. Sometime between the 4th and the 7th year, you start to make a little bit of money, and you start to spend. And because you're fed up starving, you're fed up watching your employees make a shit pile, and you're making nothing, and you start to spend. And that 4th to 7th years where, as an entrepreneur, you have to have some discipline and go, I'm not going to spend it. I'm going to ride this out, because most guys get caught up and go, I'm still driving my shitty 2008 Camry, and I'm still living in the shitty house, and I haven't had a vacation. Screw it all. I'm going to Barbados, and I'm buying a new BMW, and I'm now 6 years in business. And they actually start to outspend themselves, and they actually become disfocused on their day-to-day operation of their business, and they push themselves into being self-centered.
Okay.
And usually your egos take off. And it puts them in a really vulnerable position that they're unaware it's happening. Okay. And then sometime between the 7th year and the 10th year, they implode. Because they've actually done an about face. They've gone from starving to spending, and then can't catch up with that spend, and that reoccurring stress that you had in the first 3 years comes back in the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th year. Okay. And that's when you say, okay, I've had enough. And
that's when most people give up.
Most people quit. Yeah, most people quit. So when we turned 10 years old, I remember I had a party. Because I knew that I beat that statistical average. It was literally the 10-year plus a day. I was like, woo, holy shit, I made it, right? I'm not, because ironically, so the next phase of that is most companies that make 10 will make 30.
Amazing.
Yeah. So once you flip over that.
Yeah.
The other problem is in that first 4 years, for all entrepreneurs out there, accountants are assholes. And I love my accountants. Ross, you're a beautiful human. And Z, you're great too.
They're historians, right?
Right. So the problem is your accountants look at you on a historical level.
Yes.
Accountants have a tendency of telling you, when they describe about making money, they describe it in a gross fashion and tell you that you made 50% margins, or they tell you they made 30% margins. So you did $500,000, you made 50% margins. it's not real because they don't deduct the taxes, the expenses, the receiver general, and you get a false sense of security from them.
Agreed. Yes.
And what they're and ironically, by the time, because I'm sure it's the same in the United States, by the time they tell you this little fact that you made a shit pile of money, it's usually 6 months after your year end.
You're like, where is it? Where is that money?
Yeah. So they've told you this sometime between the 3rd and the 6th month after your year end. You actually get a little bit of a punch in your ego and go, I can spend. Mm. And then you realize that they come back to you and go, oh, no, but you still owe RevCan, the receiver generally, 75 grand. And you're just, I just bought a new truck for 75 grand. Why didn't you tell me that? To the point where you can lose control of that is I had an accountant. So my standard operation from the beginning of time when Kevin Byrne was my partner, the GOAT, Kevin was always, and God bless him, he said, we're paying the receiver general before we pay ourselves. 5, 6, 10 years ago, I had an accountant who decided that we needed more cash flow and not pay the receiver general on a monthly basis. At the end of the year, asked me for a check for 300 grand.
How do you sleep at night?
And so as an entrepreneur, there's probably 2 things that you stare at the most. 3 things: your bank balance, your payables, and your receivables. Mm-hmm. The problem is they don't put taxes in as a real receivable. It's not in the GL the same way as all of the real payables are. Mm-hmm. So it gives you a false sense of the spread between your payables and receivables. And if your accountant decides to not pay them every month, and all my accountants over the years have all gone, you're giving up your money too early. You should hang on to your cash. Don't give it to the government. The problem is an entrepreneur, and everybody is going to tell you you shouldn't. We all do it. That bank account for your company becomes your personal bank account. Psychologically.
Okay.
I mean, I have a personal bank account, but it becomes psychologically your benchmark to success, not your personal bank account. You might only have $60 in it, but you have 100 grand in your corporate account, and you look at that like it's yours.
Right.
You can't help it.
Yeah.
Your company is yours. So you look at that bank account like it's yours. And so you stare at it all the time, and it gives you a false sense of security. And accountants always talk in historical terms. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've seen my accountant tell my management staff about how well we're doing, only to realize that he was talking about 2 quarters ago, and this quarter we're not doing that well.
Right.
Right? Because he's not current. Because he's a historian. So it's a real paradox and a real dilemma for most entrepreneurs to have some rationale. Going back to the money issue, and you said about crying, about getting checks and not having any money there. So for everybody out in the planet, and I'm going to do an anecdotal story with this, money, you can rent happiness. Money creates happiness. Money does not make you content as a human. Mm-hmm. It does not make you self-aware. It does not drive positive energy through you, but it will rent happiness. I was sitting around a table with a bunch of friends one evening on a beautiful July day, and we just climbed off a friend's sailboat, and that was probably worth $250,000. And we went over to his house, and we sat around a big fancy granite tabletop, and they opened up a $100 bottle of wine and we poured it. And it's funny how people who have a sustainable paycheck, they all sat around the table and said, money doesn't buy happiness. And I said, boys and girls, I want you to sign the back of your paychecks right now because it fucking buys me happiness. Right? So, and they were all like, whoa. And I'm like, hold on, you just told me that your paycheck doesn't mean anything to your happiness. You would be happy without your paycheck. Sweet, because I've never met anybody who's poor that's super happy.
Right. There's a saying is something like, people say money doesn't matter. I'm going to botch this, but it's something to do with oxygen. Like you need it.
We're in a monetary society.
Yep. It sure helps.
And it rents happiness. It really does.
So what do you say to the entrepreneur out there who's been doing this 3-4 years and they think, I'm broken. I shouldn't be doing this because I've been trying to do this for 3-4 years. I seem to get ahead a little bit and then I get knocked back down. And sometimes I have, it's either feast or famine, right? And they're ready to throw in the towel. What do you say to them?
Quit.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I tell them to quit. Go back and get a job.
Wow.
Go back
you don't
and get a
think
job.
people can bounce back with a pep talk?
No.
Really?
No.
See, because I bounced back.
I think that I think what people do, and a lot of this stuff. Listen, being self-aware is a really complicated thing, and most people go, "I'm really self-aware." Money does rent happiness, and the problem is most of us are in some kind of weird euphoric state, and we're looking for happiness all the time. And I think that when they don't have money, okay, and the problem with being poor is that now the money affects you, and it usually affects your home life.
Fights.
I mean,
Yeah,
okay, so there's only two things that destroy a marriage: sex and money. That's it. There's nothing else that wrecks. There's nothing else that will wreck your home life. Your sex life, sexuality, not getting laid. Your sexuality and money. Those are the only two things. And usually, when you lose that money and you don't have it, it affects your home life. I got to tell you, I'm not very horny when I'm broke.
Yep. I think people can agree.
Okay.
That resonates with
No,
people.
I mean,
yeah,
listen,
agreed.
because you're depressed, you're bummed out, you're frustrated, you can't sleep at night. I literally, after 30 years, and in the first 4 or 5, I didn't sleep well. I still don't. It's a habit I still have. I am wide awake. My staff all laughed at me this morning because I was sending emails out at 3:30 last night. I am wide awake in bed. So also what you realize in that second, third, fourth, fifth year, you realize that being an entrepreneur is not 40 hours a week. Okay, so then you really have to say to yourself, am I a entrepreneur by the definition in Webster's Dictionary, or am I a new hybrid, which is, they talk about it in MBA courses, a lifestyle entrepreneur. So you can run a little entrepreneurial business and make yourself $100,000 a year and screw off to the cottage. And you really have to make that decision whether, because you get frustrated that you're not doing that well. Meanwhile, you're like, well, I'm still making a paycheck. And you have to really say to yourself, okay, so I'm not going to be Frank Stronach. I'm not going to be Warren Buffett, right? And you need to go, I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. Or you have to go, no, I'm going to roll the dice again, and I'm going to put it all on the line and push the chips all off to the side and bet on Black 64. Because entrepreneurship is an addiction. And it's either, and most entrepreneurs have some kind of addictive behaviors.
Yes.
Totally. They have to. So all entrepreneurs, know whether you like it or not, have to be obsessive compulsive and have addictive nature. You can't actually survive in entrepreneurship without those features.
See abuse, you keep coming back for more.
You just can't. Because you're looking for that next high. You're looking for the next thing. You're looking for something to take off. You're never satisfied with what happened today. It's about what happens tomorrow.
Do you take time to celebrate besides the 10-year mark? Are you the type of person where something great happens, you hit a milestone and you're already thinking about the next, or do you stop? Because this is a typical entrepreneur thing too. So I'm curious.
Okay. So because historically, I've only had very few things that have pushed my career backwards. And for the things that push my career forwards, do I celebrate them all the time? I think celebrating is, I think you have to celebrate your successes all the time. But I think, having life balance, and I'm talking differently than I would have talked in my 20s, right? But I think that having life balance is really, really important. Knowing that I cannot work 40 hours a week. So when I talk about life balance isn't about getting to work at 9, leaving at 5.
Right.
Life balance is about making sure that you can, at times, and I'm going to look at Alex, because at times I have to be dad or uncle, and I have to be able to switch it and be president and boss, and I have to switch it and be salesperson, and I have to switch it and be podcast broadcaster guy. And for anybody who's close to me can literally watch within a single conversation, being able to switch, click, 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 click from each personality and still finish my day with Alex and say, I love you. And I think that comes with time and self-awareness. I know that my first marriage got destroyed from a lot because of my entrepreneurial business, because you become self-centered, you become narcissistic. That's all part of the addictive behaviors, right? So you become self-centered, narcissistic, ego-driven. It's really hard to backpedal, and you have to be really humble to do it. The problem is that all the people that you've kicked in the face along the way don't have the means to turn the other cheek. They won't forgive you. So you have to be prepared to cut it off, throw it away, and move on. Because most of us, whether we like it or not, are not forgiving. My brother Kevin, he won't ever forgive me. But that's normal, by the way. It's not abnormal not to forgive. And we always say, well, I forgive you. I'll be honest with you, a little tick of resentment goes on that little chart. And depending on how many ticks is how much I'm going to allow you to be in my life or out. And we naturally push people out of our lives if they're giving off negative energy or we feel they're creating it. So what I have learned in the last 10 years is that I'm the only person responsible for my own happiness. I'm not responsible for anybody else's. Okay, that was a hard thing. And I actually, God bless his soul, when Hilton died, my son, it took me 2 years of fucking wicked amount of therapy to realize that my son's death, my son was not responsible for my happiness. I also realized that I'm responsible for me. Yeah. I also realized that all my staff are responsibly happy for themselves as well, not me. Yes, I provide a safe place to work and fun, and we have dogs lying around and loud music playing. All super cool. But I didn't let the dogs be here and build a super cool place to work for the staff. And that sounds really bad. I did it for me. Knowing that the brand I was creating or the atmosphere I was creating that would make me happy, by chance would make a large group of people happy.
And attract the right people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't do it for them. And so there's a real fine line between being selfish and being narcissistic. So I believe that everybody should be selfish. If you're super happy, I'm pretty sure your husband will be.
Agreed.
Right.
I think you'd agree.
So as long, right? Happy wife, happy life. Yeah. So, but I think it works both ways. I think if your husband's in a good place, you're in a good place. Positive energy is, so going back to more of a spiritual look at entrepreneurship, you have to be a good entrepreneur. You have to have as much positive energy in your hand as you have to have negative, and it's a scale, and one cannot be greater than the other. Do you know if you have too much positive energy, like being in the first 6 months of being with your husband, you make euphoric, romantic, glossed over decisions because you're so in love and so much passion and your heart's beating 100 miles an hour every time this person calls you that you actually lose perspective. People call it the honeymoon period, and it's a great period to be in, right? It's a sexy, beautiful period. But you need to know that that's not real, and that your positive bank is through the roof. And you make bad decisions when you're too euphoric. It's like your accountant telling you got a ton of money and you run out and buy the BMW for $100 grand, right? And then what happens is the negative bank goes through the roof.
Right.
So the problem with being too negative is that you can make decisions in anger and haste. So the idea is to have your positive energy and your negative energy balanced. Now, ironically, we do this innately.
I was just about to ask you, how do you,
We do it innately. Your job or anybody's job as an adult or as an entrepreneur or a leader or a parent is to make sure that you're self-aware of this positive and negative energy so that you can make strong, good decisions for yourself, not for other people. And if you have enough pessimism and enough optimism together, they're both powerful things to use in your arsenal, but you cannot have one more than the other because it will distort your decision-making process. I got to shovel the driveway. It's freaking cold. It's still March and it's still winter in Canada. I'm Tim Byrne. This is Tim Byrne almost live from his Chateau T-Ball in Northern Ontario. Nikki, you're a rock star. I love that you interviewed me. We're going to do another podcast with her at her facility with her salespeople real soon. Filtrex, Chris Blunt, hey. Stadia, you guys are cool. Burn on demand, handyman, general contracting right across Canada. Google them. That's my daughter's company. Woo! It's cold. I'll see you next week. Thumbs up me. Find me on YouTube, Instagram, Google Music, iTunes, Spotify. It's cold.